Medieval warfare conjures images of knights in shining armor charging across battlefields on destriers, but the reality was far more complex and fascinating. Behind the legendary tales of chivalry existed an entire ecosystem of specialized warriors whose skills and tactics fundamentally shaped how conflicts were fought. Today, we're diving deep into 5 medieval warrior classes that history books rarely mention. Yet these fighters were the backbone of countless campaigns and the architects of military evolution across centuries of warfare. These weren't just footnotes in military history, these were the professionals who filled critical gaps that neither noble cavalry nor peasant levies could address effectively. Each class we'll explore today represents a unique solution to specific battlefield challenges, revealing how medieval commanders constantly adapted their forces to match evolving tactics, terrain, and technology. From elite bodyguards who lived and died by personal oaths to mobile raiders who redefined reconnaissance warfare, these warriors demonstrate that medieval military organization was far more sophisticated than popular culture suggests. What makes these warrior classes particularly compelling is how they bridged social and military gaps that seem impossible to modern eyes. They operated in a world where your fighting role was determined by wealth, birth, training, and geographic necessity. Yet within these constraints, remarkable innovation flourished. Men found ways to maximize limited resources, develop specialized skills, and create tactical doctrines that would influence warfare for centuries beyond the Middle Ages itself. Let's begin our journey with perhaps the most elite and least understood of these warrior classes. First up, the Housecarls, royal guardians whose loyalty was purchased with silver and sealed with blood oaths that transcended ordinary feudal bonds. Imagine being handpicked by a king not for your noble bloodline or vast estates, but purely for your skill with weapons and unwavering reliability under pressure. Housecarls represented the pinnacle of professional medieval infantry, forming the inner circle of rulers who understood that survival often depended on having warriors whose loyalty couldn't be questioned and whose training never stopped. These weren't seasonal soldiers who showed up for campaign obligations, then returned to farming. Housecarls lived for war. They slept in halls adjacent to their lord's chambers, ate at his table as honored retainers, and maintained constant readiness for deployment wherever threats emerged. Their compensation system was revolutionary for its time, combining regular wages with gift-giving ceremonies that reinforced personal bonds between warrior and ruler. Land grants, fine weapons, jewelry, and horses served both practical and symbolic purposes, elevating Housecarls above common freemen while keeping them dependent on continued royal favor. The oath-swearing ceremonies that bound Housecarls to their lords were intensely personal affairs. Unlike broader feudal obligations that could be fulfilled through substitutes or monetary payments, a Housecarl's commitment was direct and specific: protect the king's life, maintain formation discipline even when militia units broke and fled, and stand ready to die rather than retreat from assigned positions. In exchange came not just material rewards, but social prestige that set these warriors apart in communities where martial reputation determined status and marriage prospects. Their equipment reflected both their elite status and tactical specialization. A fully equipped Housecarl wore layered protection, starting with a thick gambeson padded with wool or linen, covered by a mail hauberk that extended to the knees, with a separate coif protecting neck and skull. Conical helmets with prominent nasal guards provided face protection while maintaining visibility during close combat. The iconic kite-shaped shield offered superior leg protection during infantry engagements where formations stayed tightly packed for mutual support. But the weapon that truly defined Housecarl identity was the Danish axe, a fearsome two-handed implement with a broad, bearded blade mounted on a shaft reaching 5 to 6 feet in length. This wasn't just a larger version of a woodsman's tool. The Danish axe was precision-engineered for battlefield destruction, capable of shearing through shield rims, crippling horses with devastating leg strikes, and punching through mail armor when wielded by warriors trained in coordinated techniques. Housecarl tactical doctrine centered on disciplined formation, fighting that maximized their superior training and equipment. The front rank would establish a shield wall with overlapping protection, using spears and short weapons to present a bristling hedge of points against charging enemies. Behind them, the second rank wielded those massive Danish axes in carefully timed strikes that arced over the front line to crash down on opponents attempting to press attacks home. This created a defensive position that could absorb tremendous punishment while delivering devastating counterattacks. Their real battlefield value emerged during crisis moments when lesser troops might panic or break formation. Housecarls trained constantly to maintain proper spacing, coordinate weapon techniques, and execute tactical maneuvers under stress conditions that would scatter irregular forces. They could identify key terrain features that channeled enemy movements, establish defensive positions that maximized natural advantages, and read battlefield signals even amid the chaos of close combat. When campaign armies moved through hostile territory, Housecarls served as mobile troubleshooters for problems that could doom entire expeditions. They policed foraging parties to prevent undisciplined looting that might provoke local resistance, guarded supply trains carrying siege equipment and provisions, and maintained order during river crossings, where panicked crowds could create disasters far worse than enemy action. During peacetime, their responsibilities extended into administrative and training roles that prepared the broader military system for future conflicts. Housecarls inspected weapons and armor for seasonal levies, ensuring that equipment met minimum standards for campaign service. They escorted tax collections along dangerous roads where bandits might target valuable cargo, and they drilled with local forces to maintain tactical proficiency between active campaigns. The recruitment process for Housecarls drew from multiple sources, reflecting the practical needs of rulers who valued competence over social connections. Experienced warriors from northern regions brought traditions of disciplined infantry fighting and familiarity with Danish axe techniques. Ambitious locals with proven martial skills could advance into royal service if they demonstrated reliability and tactical intelligence. Veterans from coastal fleets already understood the strict discipline and coordinated action necessary for effective professional service. Advancement opportunities within Housecarl ranks were realistic for capable warriors willing to invest years in royal service. Outstanding performance might earn gold arm rings, fine horses, or small estates that provided income to support increasingly expensive equipment requirements. Some veterans transitioned into mounted service as their status rose, while others took command positions overseeing armories, training programs, or detached units stationed at strategic locations throughout royal territories. The political upheavals that swept across Europe during the late 11th century forced many Housecarl units to adapt or seek employment elsewhere, but their tactical concepts and professional standards influenced military development for generations. They had proven that well-trained, properly equipped infantry could hold ground against elite cavalry and provide the stable foundation that ambitious rulers needed for successful campaigns. Now let's turn our attention to warriors whose power came not from heavy armor or noble birth, but from years of disciplined practice with a single devastating weapon. Second, the longbowmen, whose ability to rain death from extraordinary distances fundamentally altered the balance of medieval warfare. The English longbow wasn't simply a scaled-up hunting weapon. It was a marvel of medieval engineering that demanded extraordinary physical conditioning and years of dedicated training to master effectively. Surviving examples reveal draw weights ranging from 100 to 160 pounds, requiring strength levels that modern recreational archers can barely comprehend. This wasn't equipment that casual soldiers could pick up and use competently after brief instruction periods. Training began in childhood, with boys as young as 7 starting archery practice that would continue throughout their lives. Archaeological evidence from medieval cemeteries tells a remarkable story of physical adaptation to these demanding weapons. Skeletal remains of lifelong archers show distinctive bone deformations in shoulders, arms, and spine, clear evidence of the muscular development required to draw and release those massive bows repeatedly during extended combat engagements. The tactical effectiveness of massed longbow fire created battlefield conditions unlike anything European warfare had previously experienced. A trained archer could loose 10 to 12 arrows per minute, creating coordinated volleys that literally darkened the sky above advancing enemy formations. Contemporary chroniclers describe the psychological impact of thousands of shafts whistling overhead, followed by the devastating crashes as bodkin points punched through mail armor and toppled horses before cavalry charges could reach their targets. Logistical requirements for longbow armies were staggering in scope and complexity. Successful campaigns required tens of thousands of arrows prepared months in advance, with specialized craftsmen working continuously to maintain supply lines. Fletchers produced standardized shafts with carefully matched weights and aerodynamic properties, while bowyers selected and seasoned yew wood through processes that took years to complete properly. Each archer carried personal arrow supplies, but prolonged engagements demanded organized resupply systems that could deliver fresh ammunition under battlefield conditions. The longbow's penetrating power against armored opponents proved revolutionary for military tactics and social structures alike. Mail hauberks and early plate armor could be pierced at closer ranges, while horses presented large vulnerable targets that could be brought down even when riders wore extensive protection. This capability fundamentally shifted battlefield dynamics, proving that disciplined infantry with ranged weapons could neutralize elite mounted troops whose training and equipment had dominated European warfare for centuries. Beyond pure military applications, longbow training became embedded in legal codes and social customs that reinforced civilian archery skills throughout peacetime. Village greens hosted mandatory practice sessions where men honed their abilities while participating in community events that combined civic duty with competitive entertainment. These requirements created deep pools of trained archers who could be mobilized during military emergencies without extensive additional preparation. The social composition of longbow companies differed significantly from traditional military hierarchies based on wealth and noble connections. Effective archery depended on individual skill and physical conditioning rather than expensive equipment or aristocratic lineage, creating opportunities for capable commoners to achieve recognition and advancement through demonstrated competence rather than inherited status. Longbowmen represented a different model of martial power, one rooted in collective discipline and technical expertise, rather than individual prowess with sword and lance. Their devastating effectiveness at battles throughout the 100 Years' War demonstrated that traditional assumptions about military superiority were becoming obsolete, forcing even the most prestigious warrior classes to adapt their tactics or face systematic defeat at the hands of well-trained infantry forces. Their legacy extends far beyond specific battlefield victories, reshaping military thinking about the relationship between technology, training, and tactical doctrine. They proved that innovations in weapon design, combined with systematic training programs and proper logistical support, could enable ordinary soldiers to challenge and defeat elite opponents whose advantages had previously seemed insurmountable. Let's shift our focus now to a warrior class that exemplified mobility and adaptability in an age when warfare was becoming increasingly specialized. Third, the hobelars, masters of light cavalry tactics, whose speed and flexibility filled crucial gaps that neither knights nor infantry could address effectively. Hobelars rode a different kind of horse than the massive destriers preferred by heavy cavalry. Their mounts, called hobbies, were smaller, more agile animals bred for endurance and maneuverability, rather than the shock impact of knightly charges. These horses could traverse rough terrain, ford rivers, and maintain pace during extended raids that would exhaust heavier cavalry formations. The tactical implications of this mobility were profound, enabling hobelar units to operate in regions where traditional mounted warfare proved ineffective or impossible. Equipment carried by hobelars reflected their emphasis on speed and versatility over raw protective power. Padded gambesons, sometimes reinforced with mail sections, provided reasonable protection while maintaining the flexibility necessary for mounted archery and rapid maneuvering. Their weapon loadouts typically included spears for mounted combat, swords for close-quarters fighting, and sometimes javelins for skirmishing engagements where mobility trumped sustained melee capability. The tactical niche occupied by hobelars emerged from practical battlefield requirements that existing military structures could not address efficiently. Heavy cavalry delivered devastating shock attacks on open ground, but struggled in forests, marshlands, and mountainous regions where their advantages disappeared. Infantry formations provided staying power and defensive capabilities, but lacked the speed necessary for pursuit, reconnaissance, and rapid response missions that often determined campaign outcomes. Hobelar operations specialized in the unglamorous but essential tasks that determined whether armies could function effectively in hostile territory. They served as scouts, providing early warning about enemy movements and terrain conditions ahead of main forces. Their mobility made them ideal for raiding missions against supply convoys, isolated outposts, and communication lines that supported enemy operations. During retreats, hobelar units could harass pursuing forces while buying time for slower infantry formations to reach defensive positions. The economic advantages of maintaining hobelar units appealed to rulers seeking military effectiveness without the crushing expenses associated with supporting large numbers of heavily armored knights. Hobby horses cost substantially less than war destriers, while hobelar equipment requirements remained affordable for minor landholders and ambitious freemen who couldn't finance full knightly service. This allowed armies to field significantly more mounted troops without proportional increases in military expenditure. Social recruitment patterns for hobelar service differed markedly from traditional knightly hierarchies. Rather than depending exclusively on wealthy nobles who could afford expensive equipment, hobelar companies drew from broader populations of free farmers, townsmen, and minor gentry who possessed basic riding skills and could maintain lighter cavalry equipment. This expanded the potential recruitment base while creating advancement opportunities for capable warriors regardless of their inherited social status. Regional conflicts that emphasized raiding, sieges, and mobile warfare proved ideal environments for hobelar tactics to demonstrate their strategic value. In frontier regions where static defensive positions were vulnerable to flanking attacks, hobelar mobility enabled rapid concentration of forces at threatened points. Their ability to strike quickly and withdraw before heavier enemy units could respond made them invaluable for disrupting enemy plans and maintaining initiative during extended campaigns. Over time, royal armies began incorporating hobelar units as permanent components rather than temporary auxiliaries, recognition of their tactical importance beyond specific regional conflicts. This institutional acceptance reflected broader military evolution toward combined arms approaches that integrated different warrior types to achieve tactical advantages no single force could provide independently. The hobelar example illustrates how medieval military innovation often emerged from practical necessity rather than theoretical doctrine. Commanders faced with specific terrain, economic, and strategic challenges developed tactical solutions that maximized available resources while addressing genuine battlefield requirements, creating warrior classes whose contributions deserve recognition alongside more famous military figures. Our next warrior class demonstrates how agricultural tools could be transformed into formidable weapons through tactical innovation and disciplined training. Fourth, the billmen, whose polearm mastery represented medieval infantry's evolution toward versatile, cost-effective formations that could challenge traditional military hierarchies. The bill itself evolved from agricultural origins, beginning as a tool used for hedging and woodland management before military adaptation transformed it into a fearsome battlefield weapon. The characteristic hooked blade, combined with spear points and sometimes additional cutting edges, created a multi-purpose implement capable of thrusting like a spear, chopping like an axe, and hooking opponents from their saddles with devastating effectiveness. This versatility proved crucial as medieval warfare moved away from simple spear and shield formations toward more complex tactical systems. A line of disciplined billmen could present spear points against charging cavalry, then transition to chopping attacks when enemies closed to melee range, and finally use the hook features to pull mounted opponents down into the press of foot soldiers where armor advantages disappeared. The tactical relationship between billmen and longbow units created combined arms approaches that multiplied the effectiveness of both weapon systems. Archers would disrupt enemy formations with massed volleys, causing casualties and confusion that allowed billmen to advance, while opponents struggled to maintain cohesion. Once engaged at close range, the bill's multiple attack options proved devastating against enemies already weakened by arrow fire and tactical disorganization. Equipment standards for billmen varied considerably based on local resources and military traditions, but successful units typically maintained reasonable protective gear without compromising mobility. Padded jacks reinforced with small metal plates offered practical protection against common weapons while remaining affordable for yeoman soldiers. Steel caps or simple sallets protected heads without the expense of full helmets, and small bucklers or daggers provided backup options for close combat situations. The sight of coordinated bill formations advancing with hooked blades flashing in unison created profound psychological effects on opponents, particularly cavalry forces whose tactical doctrine depended on shock impact and mounted supremacy. Horses instinctively feared the hooking motions that threatened to drag riders from their saddles, while the reach advantage of polearms forced mounted troops to accept unfavorable engagement conditions. Billmen represented broader social and military trends toward more inclusive warrior classes that didn't depend exclusively on inherited wealth or aristocratic connections. Successful units could be recruited from yeoman farmers and urban craftsmen who possessed sufficient resources to equip themselves properly, but lacked the extensive land holdings necessary for knightly service. This created a practical middle ground between expensive professional troops and unreliable peasant levies. Training requirements for effective bill combat emphasized formation discipline and coordinated techniques rather than individual weapon mastery. Units needed to maintain proper spacing during advances, coordinate simultaneous attacks against specific targets, and execute tactical maneuvers while under pressure from enemy forces. These skills could be developed through regular drilling without the lifetime commitment required for knightly combat proficiency. The defensive capabilities of well-trained bill formations proved particularly valuable during siege warfare and defensive campaigns, where armies needed to hold ground against superior numbers or better-equipped opponents. The reach advantage of polearms, combined with the bill's multiple attack options, created defensive positions that could absorb substantial punishment while inflicting heavy casualties on attacking forces. Strategic deployment of billmen often involved positioning them as anchoring units for broader infantry lines, providing stability and striking power that allowed other troop types to operate more effectively. Their ability to engage both cavalry and infantry opponents made them valuable for commanders seeking tactical flexibility without maintaining separate specialist units for different threat types. The enduring presence of bill-armed infantry throughout the later medieval period demonstrates how practical innovation could create effective warrior classes from relatively humble origins. Their success illustrates medieval military adaptation towards solutions that balanced effectiveness with affordability, creating sustainable military systems that didn't depend entirely on expensive elite forces. Finally, let's examine a warrior class that embodied the intersection of civic duty, personal independence, and military excellence. Fifth, the yeomen, free landholders whose military service reflected both social status and communal responsibility in ways that distinguished them from both peasant levies and aristocratic cavalry. Yeomen occupied a unique position within medieval social hierarchies, possessing sufficient land ownership to maintain economic independence while lacking the extensive holdings that defined true nobility. This intermediate status created both opportunities and obligations that shaped their military role in distinctive ways. They had enough resources to equip themselves for war without depending entirely on lords' patronage, but their land holdings carried expectations of military service that couldn't be easily avoided or delegated to substitutes. The most famous manifestation of yeoman military culture centered on longbow archery, where regular practice wasn't merely encouraged, but mandated through legal requirements that made training a civic obligation. Village greens hosted archery sessions that combined military preparation with community social events, creating cultural traditions that reinforced both individual skill development and collective identity as capable defenders of local interests. This systematic approach to archery training produced remarkable results over generations of consistent practice. Yeoman archers developed the physical conditioning necessary to handle warbows with draw weights that professional soldiers from other regions couldn't manage effectively. Their accuracy and rate of fire created tactical capabilities that allowed commanders to deploy massed archery as a primary battlefield system rather than merely supporting other troop types. Beyond archery specialization, many yeomen served effectively as bill-armed infantry or spearmen when tactical situations required close combat capabilities. Their economic position allowed them to afford better protective equipment than the poorest levies, including reinforced jacks, steel helmets, and quality sidearms that provided options during extended melee engagements. This equipment flexibility made them valuable components of combined arms formations. The social dynamics surrounding yeoman military service created cultural patterns that reinforce both individual excellence and community solidarity. Military competence became a marker of social status within yeoman communities, while collective training activities strengthened local bonds that translated into battlefield cohesion during actual campaigns. These social reinforcement mechanisms helped maintain military readiness across peacetime periods, when formal training might otherwise lapse. Yeoman participation in local administration reflected their intermediate social position between powerless peasants and dominant nobility. Their landholdings qualified them for roles in manor courts, tax assessment, and community decision-making that required both literacy and practical judgment. Military service earned additional recognition from higher authorities who valued reliable troops capable of independent thinking and tactical initiative. The geographic distribution of yeoman settlements often reflected defensive considerations, with concentrations in frontier regions where military threats remained constant concerns. These communities developed martial cultures that emphasized practical skills, collective defense, and rapid mobilization capabilities that proved invaluable during border conflicts and raiding campaigns that might emerge with little warning. Economic independence allowed yeomen to maintain equipment standards and training regimens that surpassed typical militia capabilities while avoiding the crushing expenses associated with knightly service. They could invest in quality bows, arrows, and protective gear without requiring ongoing subsidies from feudal superiors, creating sustainable military capacity that didn't strain broader economic systems. The tactical deployment of yeoman units often emphasized their reliability and discipline rather than specialized combat techniques. Commanders valued their ability to maintain formation under pressure, execute complex maneuvers, and provide steady performance during extended campaigns where less experienced troops might break under stress. Their civic backgrounds translated into understanding of collective responsibility that made them ideal for operations requiring sustained cooperation. Regional variations in yeoman military culture reflected local conditions and threats, but common themes included emphasis on practical competence, community service, and individual advancement through demonstrated capability. These warrior citizens proved that effective military force didn't require exclusive dependence on professional soldiers or aristocratic cavalry, demonstrating alternative models of martial organization based on broader social participation. The legacy of yeoman warriors extends beyond specific battlefield contributions to encompass broader questions about citizenship, military service, and social organization. They represented successful integration of martial excellence with civic responsibility, creating sustainable military systems that balanced individual advancement with collective security needs. These 5 warrior classes reveal the remarkable diversity and sophistication of medieval military organization, far beyond the simplified narratives of knights and peasants that dominate popular understanding. Each class emerged as practical solutions to specific tactical, economic, and social challenges that medieval commanders faced during centuries of evolving warfare. From the elite Housecarls who provided reliable professional infantry through personal oath bonds, to the devastating longbowmen whose massed archery revolutionized battlefield tactics, these warriors demonstrate medieval innovation and adaptation in military affairs. The mobile hobelars filled crucial reconnaissance and raiding roles that neither heavy cavalry nor infantry could address effectively, while billmen created versatile polearm formations that challenged traditional martial hierarchies through practical effectiveness. Finally, the yeomen embodied successful integration of civic duty with military excellence, proving that warrior cultures could emerge from broad social participation rather than exclusive elite traditions. Together, these classes illustrate how medieval warfare depended on complex systems of specialized troops whose contributions shaped military history far beyond the famous battles and legendary heroes that capture popular imagination. Understanding these forgotten warriors provides deeper appreciation for medieval military sophistication and reminds us that historical warfare involved far more tactical complexity and social innovation than simplified popular narratives suggest. These men may not have gained the fame of knightly heroes, but their disciplined service and tactical excellence provided the foundation upon which medieval armies achieved their greatest victories and most significant military developments.